what you can't explain. It's coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. In June of 1999, a woman driving by a cornfield in St. Charles County, Missouri noticed something strange, something that shouldn't have been there. The badly decomposed body of a man lying face down in the heat with no obvious injuries and no sign of a struggle. His name was Ricky McCormick, and no one seems to know how he got there. He wasn't reported missing, he didn't own a car, the area was miles from the nearest bus stop, and not even close to being within walking distance of where he worked and lived. No one saw him arrive, and no one knew anything about how he died. But in Ricky's pockets, police found something bizarre. Unexpected, that you wouldn't think would be there. They found 2 crumpled sheets of paper filled with random letters, numbers, slashes, and symbols. It wasn't a note saying goodbye. It wasn't a journal. It was a cipher that may hold clues or even answers to what happened to Ricky. And no one, not the FBI, not professional cryptographers, not even the world's best code breakers, have ever figured out what these 2 sheets of paper mean. There's no doubt that Ricky was the victim of foul play, but why? Did he know something that he shouldn't have? Was he living a double life? Or was the cipher just the product of a troubled mind? We have a lot to talk about today, but first let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money. Do you ever check your bank statement and say, wait, what am I paying for here? 'Cause same. I recently found out I was still getting charged for a subscription I swore I canceled months ago. Actually, multiple subscriptions I was sure I canceled months ago. And honestly, I'm not alone. Over 85% of people have at least one paid subscription they aren't even using. And if you have only one, then you're doing way better than me. And that is where Rocket Money comes in. That's today's sponsor. Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better, all in one place. So I started using Rocket Money actually a very long time ago, over a year ago, for a lot of different reasons, because it does a lot of different things. So when they reached out to me and they wanted to partner on a video, I was like, absolutely, because I could talk about Rocket Money forever, because it's super easy. When I started using Rocket Money, within minutes, it pulled up every single subscription I was paying for, some of which I'd completely forgotten about. And instead of wasting time digging through my emails or calling customer service, I was able to cancel them right from the app in just a few taps. Sometimes it can take a few days, but just the other day I canceled a subscription service I had, and it was quite a pricey one actually. And I'd been trying to call customer service and cancel with them for a few weeks, but I kept getting the runaround and I kept getting transferred to different people. It was becoming very frustrating. I was thinking I was gonna have to cancel my credit card at this point. I ended up doing it through Rocket Money, and I think within 15 minutes I got an email saying it's all set. But like I said, Rocket Money does so much more. They can also help negotiate your bills from your internet service to your phone plan so you're not overpaying. And if you like to stay on top of your finances, the app tracks your spending and sets up budgets for you automatically. So for instance, even just this morning, I got a message, an email from Rocket Money, and it was like, large transaction detected. We don't know what this is, do you? You type in there what it actually is, and Rocket Money knows how to categorize that for you in the future. So it does so much. It helps you really keep everything organized so there's no surprises. Not only does it cancel your subscriptions you don't want, but Rocket Money helps you negotiate for lower bills and things that you do want. It's perfect. I love Rocket Money. I've been using it for over a year, and I will continue to use it because Stephanie Harlowe is not good with money and she needs help. from people who are, and Rocket Money is the solution. So if you're tired of wasting money on subscriptions you don't use, or you just want a better way to manage your finances, you have to try Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Harlowe to get started for free. One more time, that's rocketmoney.com/Harlowe, and take control of your finances today. Thank you so much to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. It was Wednesday, June 30th, 1999, at around 12:45 in the afternoon, when the St. Charles County Sheriff's Department received a call about a body in a cornfield near West Alton, Missouri. When authorities arrived, they were faced with a grotesque and confusing crime scene. The deceased man had no identification. All that was found in his pockets were 2 sheets of paper written in a cipher of numbers, letters, and symbols. The following day, fingerprints gave law enforcement their victim's name, 41-year-old Ricky McCormick, who lived at 1400 Chateau Avenue in St. Louis, roughly 20 miles from where his body was found. Now, the cipher found in Ricky's pockets, that was certainly a mystery, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, but there were a few other things that confused investigators right from the start. So at first glance, there was no way to tell how Ricky had died, and even after an autopsy with the medical examiner, they still didn't have a concrete cause of death. And I'm going to be honest with you, I do not understand this part of the whole case. Because later they're going to come forward and have more information. But initially, and for months, they said they didn't know how Ricky had died. On July 6th, Major Tom O'Connor of the Major Case Squad noted that Ricky's body had been badly decomposed when it was found. And he said, quote, "We've worked every lead, and not only can we not prove it is a homicide, we can't even come up with a motive for this guy to be dead." End quote. It's kind of a weird way to say it, like, we can't come up with a motive for this guy to be dead. I think he meant, like, we don't have a reason. We're not sure why he's dead, like, as far as we see, based on the crime scene and his autopsy, he should not be dead. But it just didn't come out that way. So it was made known that Ricky McCormick suffered from chronic heart and lung illnesses. He had had these issues for some time, even since childhood, things like asthma and like I said, some heart issues, and that he had been to the hospital on June 25th complaining of heart and lung symptoms. But even if he had died of natural causes, no one could explain how Ricky had gotten to that cornfield or why he would even be there. Additionally, Ricky's body was badly decomposed. I think it was too badly decomposed to have only been there for a handful of days. We do know that he went to the hospital on June 25th. There were also eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen him alive on June 27th, just one eyewitness actually, and this would be the day that detectives believe Ricky died. So the official story was that Ricky had only been dead for 3 days or so when he was found in that cornfield. He was wearing filthy blue jeans, a stained white t-shirt, and he was so decomposed that the flesh on his outstretched hands was already rotted to the point that his fingertips just below the top knuckles had fallen off, and they were found laying next to him in the weeds. This information came from the Riverfront Times, a news outlet that obtained police records through a FOIA request, so we can assume, based on the fact that this information came from the official police records, that it is true and accurate. This stood out to me because we do know that Missouri in late June is hot, humid, and sticky, and we also know that high temperatures speed up autolysis and putrefaction, which are the biological processes that break the body down. And if Ricky was lying in a very, high sun-exposed area, which a cornfield would be, there's not any trees or anything in a cornfield to give it shade, we could expect the body to begin bloating and breaking down within 24 to 48 hours. But what this news article described with skin slippage and loss of extremities, that typically doesn't happen until around days 5 to 10, even in a very hot climate. So let's put a pin in that for now and move on. After some more time and a deeper examination, it was discovered that Ricky McCormick had been in fact murdered. There was evidence found that his throat had been slashed. But I guess initially the body was too decomposed for the coroner to figure this out and pinpoint it. Like I said before, it doesn't make much sense to me, but you know how medical examiners be sometimes. This kind of thing happens far too much, where they get it wrong or they're missing something crucial. I think a slash across the throat is pretty crucial, and how could a body be that decomposed after even, a week, right? Even if we are going to assume that Ricky was dead longer than the 3 days that they're saying he was dead, how could you miss a slash across the throat? It's very difficult for me to understand. Now, this is where the story shifts from strange to straight up cryptic. As we know, when investigators found Ricky's body, they also found something else. Folded up in his pocket were 2 handwritten notes. No names, no numbers, just line after line of bizarre, almost alien-looking sequences made up of capital letters, numbers, parentheses, dashes, and slashes. It looks like something out of a spy novel. So one line reads, TRFNE WL/SE NCBNC. Another says PERSWLD NCBE CTSE, and so on. You don't need to be a code breaker to know this doesn't look random necessarily. There's rhythm, repetition, structure. Now, a cipher is basically a way to disguise a message by rearranging or substituting letters. Think of it like an Instagram filter for secrets. You may have heard of the Caesar cipher. It's the most popular, well-known one, where each letter is replaced by another letter just a few steps down the alphabet. So A becomes D, B becomes E, and so on. But what Ricky left behind does not look like a simple Caesar shift or really any other sort of known code or cipher. There's no spaces, no clear letter patterns, and no obvious key to crack. It's like trying to read the Matrix without the red pill. But here's where it gets weirder. There are repeating letter combinations like NCBE, which show up multiple times. So what does it mean? Is it a name, a location, a warning, a filler word? Is this a secret language that Ricky made up in his head, a personal shorthand no one else could read? Or was he trying to send a message someone never wanted decoded? In 2011, Ricky's notes were released to the public and posted on the FBI's website, with the agency admitting that they were stumped and looking for crowdsourcing code breaking. The FBI announced, quote, despite extensive work by our cryptoanalysis and racketeering records unit, as well as help from the American Cryptogram Association, the meanings of these 2 coded notes remain a mystery to this day, and Ricky McCormick's murderer has yet to face justice, end quote. In fact, Ricky's notes are one of the CRRU's top unsolved cases, along with, I believe, one of the Zodiac ciphers. So definitely one of the top 3 unsolved cases is Ricky McCormick's note. Now, the Cryptoanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, the CRRU, is based at FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. It's a branch of the FBI's laboratory division, and their core mission, like their one job, is to decode, translate, and interpret encrypted or obscure communications used in organized crime, terrorism, human trafficking, extortion, murder investigations, gang activity, drug smuggling networks, and other cases involving codes, ciphers, and symbolism. I've looked into it, and they even do cool things where they'll analyze tattoos and artwork and stuff. It's very interesting. Now, the CRRU's chief, Dan Olson, said, quote, we are really good at what we do, but we could use some help with this one. Breaking the code could reveal the victim's whereabouts before his death and could lead to the solution of a homicide. Not every cipher we get arrives at our door under those circumstances. Over the years, a number of CRRU's examiners who are experts at breaking codes have puzzled over McCormick's notes and applied a variety of analytical techniques to tease out an answer. Standard routes of cryptoanalysis seem to have hit brick walls. Our cryptanalysts have several plausible theories about the notes, but so far, there has been no solution, end quote. So it's interesting because we have these 2 sheets of paper with a cipher on them found in, a murder victim's pocket. And you'd think the FBI's department that does this for a living, it's like all they do all day, every day, they could probably easily crack this, especially if it was written by Ricky, which we believe it was. As far as we know, he's not an undercover CIA agent. He didn't even graduate high school. This shouldn't have been difficult to figure out. But when the FBI's department that is specifically geared towards cracking codes cannot do it, that's going to cause some mystery here. Now, according to Craig McGuire of the St. Charles County Sheriff's Department, Ricky's family told law enforcement that he had enjoyed coming up with ciphers as a young child, and he had continued to experiment with them in adulthood. This was published in the media in 1999, but when the ciphers were publicly released in 2011, family members of Ricky's came forward and basically said they don't know where that information came from, that Ricky worked on ciphers and things when he was a kid, because Ricky couldn't even write his own name. He was illiterate. So there's a lot of contradicting sort of statements here. Who told the police in 1999 that Ricky used to come up with ciphers and codes when he was a kid and continued to do so in adulthood? Was that accurate information? Why in 2011 were the family saying that's not true, that's never been said? Ricky couldn't even write his own name, much less come up with these uncrackable codes. There's a lot to talk about, so in order to understand what happened at the end, as always, we have to go back to the beginning. Ricky McCormick was born on June 14th, 1958, and his mother, Frankie, claimed he was developmentally delayed as a child. She said something different. She used a different word to describe Ricky, and we are not going to use that word here, and I'm a bit disappointed that this was the word she chose to use specifically when talking about her own son, but that's neither here nor there, to each their own. So Ricky's family remembered that he did have an active imagination, and he would come up with a lot of tall tales. But in elementary school, Ricky would spend so much time standing off by himself, just staring off into the distance, like at recess or when they went outside, that the school would call his mother to see if anything was wrong with him at home or if she was noticing this kind of behavior at home. And Ricky's cousin Charles, who had more of a brother relationship with Ricky, he suspected that his cousin suffered from some kind of mental illness, like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, because Ricky would often talk as if he was in another world. It seemed he mentally lived in another world. He didn't want to live in reality. And Ricky's Aunt Gloria, who he was closer to than his own mother, said, quote, Ricky went to see a psychiatrist and he said Ricky had a brick wall in his mind. He said Ricky refused to break that wall. He didn't like the life of living poor and had an active imagination, end quote. By the time he dropped out of high school, Ricky McCormick could barely read or write, but he was known to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day since the age of 10 and drink coffee by the gallons. So after leaving school, Ricky sort of drifted around the St. Louis area, working odd jobs as a dishwasher or a busboy while collecting disability checks for his chronic heart issues I'm sure the cigarettes and caffeine did not help. But no matter what job he worked, Ricky preferred to do it at night, especially if it was the graveyard shift. And his Aunt Grace said, quote, I called him a vampire, he slept all day, and then at night, he rises, end quote. Unlike a vampire, though, Ricky did not fly under the radar, and he ran into some issues with law enforcement. In November of 1992, a then 34-year-old Ricky McCormick was arrested and charged with first-degree sexual abuse of a minor. And as it turned out, Ricky had fathered 2 children with a girl under the age of 14, and he had reportedly been sleeping with this girl since she was 11. This is a very weird kind of thing to talk about because I don't want to say that Ricky was sleeping with this girl because that makes it seem like it was a consensual act. And this girl was 11 years old, so it really couldn't have possibly been a consensual act in any way, shape, or form. But the victim's name was never released, and a few of Ricky's family members have said that they had met her, and even they didn't know her real name. They simply knew her as Pretty Baby. And I know you have questions, because I do too, right? Who was this girl? How did she know Ricky? How was it possible for her to be left alone with him long enough to have gotten pregnant by him not once but twice? And after the first pregnancy and the first baby being delivered, why did no one do anything? Where the hell were her parents? So many questions, and unfortunately, I don't have these answers. All I can tell you is that sadly, a lot of children fall through the cracks and don't have the guidance or protection at home to keep them safe from situations like this. So while Ricky was awaiting trial on these charges, his public defender expressed concerns. She claimed she had reasonable cause to believe that Ricky suffered from some mental disease or defect. So the judge ordered a mental health evaluation, which was done at St. Louis State Hospital by psychologist Dr. Michael Armoire. After Dr. Armoire submitted his report to the court, it was decided that Ricky McCormick was fit to stand trial, so not suffering from mental disease or defect. At least, I guess, not to the extent where he would not be able to participate in his own defense. And 6 weeks later, on September 1st, 1993, Ricky pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Ricky would only serve 11 months of this sentence before being sent home early on conditional release. Say it with me, our justice system is broken. Now, at first when I read this, I began to wonder if maybe Ricky's relationship with Pretty Baby had something to do with his death. Because as a parent, I can understand wanting to punish the person who did this to my young child, who stole her innocence, who basically had her become a mother of two by the time she was 13 or 14 years old. I'd probably want to kill him too. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I'm not going to mince words. I'm not saying I would do it, but I would definitely want to. And that still is going to be a theory for me. So once again, let's put a pin in that. But then some more information about Ricky's life came out, and that added a new theory to my brain. In 1999, the year he died, Ricky lived with his girlfriend, Sandra Jones, in the Clinton Peabody Housing Project on Chateau Ave in St. Louis. So at this time, Ricky also worked at an Amoco gas station, which was located at 1401 Chateau, which was right across the street from the apartment complex Ricky lived in, directly across the street. Now, the people who owned and operated this business, they took part in some dark activities of their own. The man who had hired Ricky, Fawaz Hamdan, died in prison while serving a life sentence after he killed his neighbor in the front yard with a butcher knife in May of 1994. After this, Palestinian immigrant Juma Hamdala took over the business and hired his brother, Baha Hamdala. Now, there were several brothers, including Juma, Baha, and then another one, Jamil, who was a registered sex offender. So they kind of all seemed to have their own issues. They all seemed to not be like the most upstanding characters in the world, but Baha Hamdala seemed to be the one getting into the most trouble, and he kind of seemed to be the worst of the brothers. He moved to St. Louis from Cleveland in 1997 when he was 22 years old, and shortly after his arrival in the new city, a police detective witnessed Baha drive up in a blue Mazda Protege, lean out of the car window, and shoot a man named Terrence Clark with a .38 pistol. Clark was able to get away unharmed. He didn't get shot, and Baha was arrested but never prosecuted. And you'll see this becomes a pattern. So the following year, on March 4th, 1998, Baha was visiting another one of his brothers at work. This other brother was named Bahat, and he worked at the Family Market, which was a small corner store in the Tower Grove neighborhood. Reportedly, for some reason, the two brothers got into some kind of argument, and Baha shot at his brother Bahat from across the street, and Bahat got hit in the stomach. Bahat was knocked to the ground. Baha sped away, but there were witnesses to this whole incident, including a store manager who knew Baha from his frequent visits to the store. So whatever reason, the brother, Bahat, claimed he did not know who his attacker was. He said he had been shot by a goateed Hispanic man, even though he definitely saw that it was his brother who did it. But 6 days later, Baha turned himself in, and he would be arrested on a felony charge of first-degree assault. But since his brother, for whatever reason, didn't want to press charges, nothing happened, and reportedly, state records now show no record of this case. That same month, Baha was arrested again at the Amoco station because he apparently beat a man named Elroy Carr with a rusty hammer. And Elroy Carr was a sometimes homeless drug addict who I guess had been hanging out in Baha's yard and sort of loitering and just trespassing and being places he wasn't supposed to be. And so Baha ended up being charged with second-degree assault, and it was alleged that he had already threatened to kill Carr, who, like I said, would sometimes be on his property. And when the police questioned Baha about this, his reply was, quote, "I just figured I'd take care of this myself." end quote. Unlike Baha's brother, Elroy Carr did not decline to press charges, but 2 weeks before his case against Baha was scheduled to appear in court, Carr was shot to death in the street just a few blocks from the Amoco station, and obviously, because he is no longer alive, the pending assault charge against Baha was dropped. And according to criminal informants, Carr was killed on the order of Baha Hamdala, but to this day, no arrests have been made in this case, and Elroy Carr's murder remains unsolved. And then in August of 1999, less than 2 months after Ricky McCormick's death, police investigated an incident where Juma Hamdala, owner of the Amoco station, shot his own brother, Baha. Baha survived once again. No charges were filed, but according to police records, law enforcement looked into the shooting, and this is when they started gathering intel that allegedly linked Baha Hamdala to, quote, black gang members in St. Louis and narcotics use, end quote. The police reports also mentioned that Baha was reported to be violent, had a long history with law enforcement, being on the wrong side of law enforcement, and seemed to also be in possession of several weapons, including handguns and knives. Knowing that Ricky McCormick's throat was slit, you might need, a knife for this. Baha had you covered. He's got handguns, he's got knives. He's apparently involved in gang activity and drug activity. So this is going to bring us back to 2 months prior, in June of 1999, when Ricky McCormick purchased a one-way bus ticket from St. Louis to Orlando, Florida. Phone records from his hotel room in Orlando at the Econo Lodge showed that while Ricky was in Orlando for 2 days, he was communicating frequently with his girlfriend back at home, Sandra Jones, and he also made at least one call to the Amoco gas station where he worked. Phone records also show that in the weeks leading up to Ricky's trip to Orlando, his girlfriend, Sandra Jones, was engaging in several phone calls to a lot of different people in Central Florida, where Ricky was going to be going. And after Ricky's death at the end of June, Sandra Jones would tell police that Ricky had made trips to Florida before. He had made at least 2 trips to Florida that same year, and she suspected that he was going there to pick up marijuana. Now, Ricky McCormick wasn't a drug kingpin or anything, but Sandra said that Ricky would accept offers to pick up and deliver packages for money, and sometimes this would bring him out of state. Jones also said that Ricky had brought marijuana to the apartment they shared in the Clinton Peabody apartment complex, and she said the drugs would usually be sealed in Ziploc bags and rolled into bundles the size of baseballs. Allegedly, according to Sandra Jones, Ricky had told her that he was holding the drugs for Baha, and although he didn't usually talk about what he did there, the last time he returned from Orlando, Florida, 2 weeks before his murder, Sandra Jones said Ricky had seemed different. He seemed scared, unsettled. Now, Ricky's Aunt Gloria felt that her nephew's movements leading up to his death would tell the story of someone who was trying to hide, somebody who was trying to find a safe place to lay low. On June 22, 1999, just a week before his death, Ricky was admitted to the Barnes Jewish Hospital's emergency room around noon. He complained of chest pains and shortness of breath, and he told the doctors that he didn't do any drugs or alcohol, which is a claim that actually has been backed up by his friends and family. He wasn't into drugs or alcohol. But Ricky did tell the doctors that he consumed at least 20 caffeinated beverages a day. That's insane. That's bananas. So there seemed to be nothing immediately wrong with Ricky, but doctors did keep him in the hospital for the next 2 days for observation. Ricky was discharged on June 24th with a scheduled appointment for a follow-up visit the next week. And on June 24th, Ricky took a bus to his Aunt Gloria's apartment. He remained there for roughly an hour. Gloria said that Ricky would usually talk to her if there was something going on in his life or on his mind. In fact, Gloria seemed to be the person he would go to when he did need to talk about something, but Ricky wasn't particularly chatty that day. They kind of sat together for an hour, had some small talk, and as he was leaving, Gloria offered to give Ricky a ride wherever he needed to go, but he declined her offer, and the last time she ever saw him, Ricky was walking away down the street. Looking back on that afternoon, Gloria said, quote, "Maybe he knew he got into something that put his life on the line. He knew he could have stayed here, but maybe he didn't want to put my life on the line," end quote. And I actually completely agree with Aunt Gloria here because Ricky could have stayed with Aunt Gloria. He could have also stayed at the apartment he shared with his girlfriend, Sandra Jones, right across the street from the Amoco station where he worked. He could have even stayed with his mother, who lived just down the road from him. But when Ricky McCormick left his Aunt Gloria's apartment, he didn't go to any of these places. Instead, he walked into the emergency room of the Forest Park Hospital on June 25th, telling doctors that he was having trouble breathing after he'd spent the afternoon mowing the lawn. So it was decided by the medical professionals that Ricky was experiencing an asthma flare-up, and he was technically released at 5:50 p.m., but he didn't leave the hospital. Aunt Gloria says she heard that Ricky spent the night in the hospital's waiting room before leaving the next morning, and this is supported by Sandra Jones, who spoke to Ricky on June 26th at around 11:30 a.m. Ricky told Sandra that he was leaving the hospital and going to the Amoco station to get something to eat. And at least one employee of the gas station claims to have seen Ricky there on the 27th, June 27th, which is the day the medical examiner believed Ricky died. So obviously the picture that I'm painting here is that the people who owned and worked at this Amoco station, where Ricky was also employed, were people who kind of lived and existed on the wrong side of the law. These are not upstanding citizens necessarily. If there was law enforcement information that one or more of the Hamdala brothers were involved in gang and drug activity, and Ricky McCormick's girlfriend, Sandra Jones, says that he was involved with helping move drugs across state lines for these people, it stands to reason that his death could have something to do with these people and these activities, especially when you consider the location where Ricky's body was found. The area west of Highway 367 between St. Louis and Alton was reportedly used by criminals to get rid of stolen cars and cash machines. And I had to do some research into it because I'd never heard of anything like this, but apparently people steal ATM machines and steal the money out of them. And apparently in this area of Missouri, ATM thefts are very high. And this isolated and out of the way area off the highway would sort of be the place that the stolen and emptied machines would turn up. Bodies would also occasionally turn up here. In 1995, police found the body of a sex worker in an abandoned house along the same stretch of highway, and in 2001, the bodies of two women were found in almost the same spot as Ricky. So on December 23, 1999, the detectives in charge of Ricky's case were contacted by Sergeant Ed Cooner of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's Homicide Division, and he spoke with Detective Jana Walters of the St. Charles Sheriff's Department and asked if she would be willing to join a meeting of various law enforcement agencies in regards to the murder of Ricky McCormick. Walters and her partner, Detective Michael Yarbrough, traveled to the St. Louis Police Headquarters 9 days later and sat in a room with members of the St. Louis Homicide and Narcotics Divisions, along with investigators from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, as well as an FBI special agent. During this meeting, it was revealed that the St. Louis police were investigating Gregory Lamar Knox, a major drug dealer who they believed was operating in and around the apartment complex where Ricky and his girlfriend Sandra Jones lived. Not only did Knox allegedly have connections to the Hamdala brothers, but he was reportedly a suspect in several homicides and at least 2 murder-for-hire schemes. A criminal informant had told detectives that Knox was responsible for the murder of a black man who had worked at a gas station on Chateau Avenue, and this CI even had information that the body of the victim had been dumped near West Alton. The gathered law enforcement agents agreed that this was something that should be pursued, and within weeks they had set up stakeouts outside of the Amoco station as well as outside the homes of several of its owners and employees. And I have to quickly shout out that Riverfront Times for publishing the best article I could find on Ricky McCormick. They were the ones who submitted a FOIA request and gained access to the police reports. And in this article, it says that despite ongoing suspicions, the CI's claims could never be substantiated, and a connection between Gregory Knox and the Hamdalas was never verified. Gregory Knox would go on to be arrested on July 25, 2000, almost a year to the day after Ricky McCormick was killed, and he pleaded guilty in January of 2001 to charges of possession with intent to distribute crack cocaine and carrying a firearm during and in relation to a drug trafficking crime. So a few months later, in March of 2001, a HUD report to Congress also stated that Knox was the suspect in at least 4 homicides that occurred in 1998 and 1999 in 2 different St. Louis public housing developments, LaSalle Park Homes and Clinton Peabody. where, as we know, Ricky McCormick lived. So it looks like Knox was part of a larger drug trafficking ring. And I don't think it was marijuana. It looks like it was heroin, looks like it was cocaine, looks like it was crack. And so I have no doubt that Ricky McCormick was going to Florida and bringing things back, and maybe some of it was marijuana. But I have a sneaking suspicion that some of what he was bringing back was just much harder drugs. And according to a January 2016 grand jury indictment, Knox was integral to a continuing criminal enterprise operating out of eastern Missouri. So after being arrested in 2000, we know that Knox went to prison. He served his sentence, and he was scheduled to be released at the end of November 2013. And according to his indictment that we now see from 2016, it appears that Knox continued his bad behavior even after his release. And it kind of seems like in St. Louis, these drug trafficking things and these criminal networks maybe have some help within the police department. We know that Baha Hamdala, he got himself into trouble many times. He was seen by a police officer shooting somebody, and somehow he managed to get out of that. There's witnesses that saw him shoot his brother. Somehow he managed to get out of that. So there could be some help within law enforcement allowing these networks to continue operating. Now, Baha Hamdala also couldn't stay out of trouble after the death of Ricky McCormick. On October 13th, 2000, while managing Charlie's Food Market in Madison, Illinois, he got into an argument with a customer named Robert Steptoe. Steptoe ended up being shot in the face with a 9mm Glock outside the store, and Baha was convicted of first-degree murder in September of 2002. So we're like, okay, Baha's finally convicted. He's going to serve some time. And although he was sentenced to 28 years in prison, in May of 2006, an appellate court ruled that the lawyer in the case had made an error by not calling a gunshot residue expert to testify in person. Instead, I guess this person, this gunshot residue expert, testified over, like a video conference. And so Baha was actually granted a retrial, and stunningly, a second jury bought into Baha's story that he'd been acting in self-defense and that the gun had accidentally gone off as he and his victim Steptoe were wrestling over it. He was released on May 15th, 2008, and then he sort of dropped off the map. He traveled from place to place. He'd pop up every so often, but yeah, definitely not serving time. So let's return to Ricky's cipher and what it could possibly mean. CRRU Chief Dan Olson has said, quote, "Maybe someone with a fresh set of eyes might come up with a brilliant new idea. Even if we found out that he was writing a grocery list or a love letter, we would still want to see how the code was solved. This is a cipher system we know nothing about," end quote. Matthew Aid, a former codebreaker and a historian of the NSA, has expressed his opinion that there does not seem to be a method to Ricky's cipher, and he said, quote, "This gentleman may have devised a cipher tied to a book. For example, you take a particular edition of King Lear and use the letters in the text to construct a cipher. Only a person who knows it's King Lear and is equipped with the same edition can translate the message. I tend to doubt this gentleman has read the works of the Bard, and he may have been a mathematical genius on the quiet. Education means nothing in code breaking. It's an instinctive business," end quote. Jim Gilligley, who's regarded as one of the best code breakers in the United States outside of the government, has also been stumped by this particular cipher, saying, quote, "I've noticed that the index of coincidence, variability of alphabet frequency, is considerably higher than normal for English, which usually means that there's an unusual amount of repetition in the plain text or that redundancy has been added during the encryption process. Perhaps it's the latter, possibly a checkerboard-style operation as part of the encipherment, perhaps with nulls or singletons to make it less obvious," end quote. I don't know what any of that means, but basically he's saying there's too much repetition for this to be just basic English. It seems like the repetition and the words and the letters repeating themselves seems intentional. And Alanka Dunnan, another well-known codebreaker who actually lives in St. Charles County where this went down, she drove past Ricky's last known address to see if there's anything she could gather about his life and his character that might aid her in cracking his cipher. And she actually said something that stuck out to me. Dunnan said, quote, "There are definitely patterns, repeated groups of letters and numbers. It's possible that he wrote these notes in personal shorthand. He was taking some care with it because you can see certain letters are smudged, as though he erased one letter and wrote another. If I could ask for one piece of information, it would be what he looked like as he wrote. Was he giving careful thought to each letter, or was he writing at a normal speed in a system he memorized and was comfortable with?" End quote. I think it's very interesting, the thought of being able to visually watch Ricky write this cipher and see how comfortable he was doing so. Was he writing quickly, as if this was a second language to him that he had developed since he was a child, or was he going very slowly, as if this was something he was still learning or working on perfecting? And many people have studied the cipher and given their opinions on it. Some believe it looks like a sort of shorthand, specifically dealing with his medical records, something that only he would understand. It's also possible that Ricky, whose family and teachers described as illiterate, may have been dyslexic, something that would have contributed to his poor academic performance and to the letters being written in this way. Now, these 2 sheets of paper could be medical stuff. It could also be a list of people he needed to pick up or deliver drugs to or from. There's a few lines that look as if they could say first person, second person, and third person, followed by what looks like some numbers and letters, which could be addresses, locations, even coordinates. Ricky's mother has scoffed at the idea that her son created this elaborate code. She claims he couldn't even write his own name. Now, Ricky's mother, Frankie, seems like kind of a bitch and maybe not like the best mother, so I kind of wish that Ricky was this Rain Man genius just so we could throw it back in her face. But I don't think that's the case here. For me, when I look at the notes, they kind of remind me of something that happens with my youngest child. So when Bella, who's 8 now, was learning how to read and write, she would always be writing things down because this new skill was exciting to her and she was exercising it. So she'd present me with a picture of a big blue and green ball, and on it she would write Erath, aka Earth, right? She just mixed up the letters. She'd also try to sound things out and write them the way they sounded in her head, and the end result would look like one of those mixed up word puzzles that you have to solve, like a word scramble. And that's kind of what Ricky's notes remind me of. There is repetition in there, and I tend to think it's more of a shorthand that he understood. I think he probably was dyslexic, but I don't think he wasn't smart. I think he was smart. He was doing the best with what he had and not ever being taught, coping strategies for dealing with this learning disability. He did the best he could. And it does seem, though, that the FBI think there's something more than that here. I don't think that they would have devoted so much time to cracking it, like over a decade, and then posting it on their website looking for help. I don't think they would have done all of that if they didn't think that there was some code here. Now, do I think the notes, even if they are coded, would reveal what happened to Ricky or how he got to the location he was found in? No. I will say I do not think that Ricky was killed in that cornfield, however. Considering the advanced level of decomposition, I believe Ricky was killed elsewhere, and then he was kept for some time in a very warm place, like the trunk of a car, possibly, and then dumped in that field. There's no murder weapon found. They don't say if there was a lot of blood around him, but even if there was, it would have soaked into the ground, but they would have still been able to tell if he was killed there. To my knowledge, that has not been revealed. I also don't know how much weight I put into the gas station employee who claimed they saw Ricky on the 27th, because the last time anyone heard from Ricky was on the 26th, when he told his girlfriend that he was going to the Amoco station to get something to eat. That same Amoco station owned and operated by the Hamdalas, people who it is believed he was running drugs for and with. It's very possible that something went wrong in Orlando, and when Ricky returned to St. Louis, he knew there was going to be very dangerous people gunning for him, so he tried to hide out in emergency rooms and hospitals for as long as he could before facing the music, or maybe someone was able to get in contact with him and lured him to that Amoco station under the false sense of security that they weren't mad at him and they would work it all out. I don't know. It's very, very sad, and I would like to know if that's a cipher that was in his pocket, and if it tells us anything even about him and his life and his inner thoughts. I would like to know, but now I turn it over to you. What do you think happened to Ricky McCormick? Do you think his cipher was really just the rambling shorthand of an illiterate man who may have suffered from a learning disability? Do you think there are messages hidden amongst the chaos that might shine a light on this mystery? Let me know what your theories are in the comment section. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. I need to hear your thoughts about this one because you know we love a good mystery. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. I love you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Oh, the levee don't break now. And the bottle's going straight down.